Okay, everybody, so welcome back to the second part of days 5 and 6 lecture. So we're going to be talking about what we would typically talk about on day 6 lecture, which is cooked creams and custards. Certain terms that you're going to want to look out for are things like nappe consistency, slurry, stabilizers, the difference between mealy and flaky doughs, pâte sucrée, pâte brisée, all that fun stuff. Bavarian cream, things that you might hear on a test. I'm twitching. Weirdness. Okay. I always hated being winked at. And I don't know why I do it in these videos. Anyway, here we go. So we're talking about cooked creams and custards. So the main stabilizing ingredient in cooked creams and custards has to be, nope, wrong, it's not flour, or whatever the heck you said. It is, however, eggs. Eggs is the main stabilizing ingredient in cooked creams and custards. So if you were doing a baker's percentage for cooked creams and custards, you would have to go to eggs as the main stabilizing ingredient. So eggs have so many positive effects in baking. On the slides, it goes through how we're talking about how they thicken things, how the yolk acts different than the white, how the white we use it to aerate and hold sugar, and how the yolk we use it for mouthfeel and creaming effects. So all kinds of good things when it comes to eggs. And one of the main things that we love about eggs is that they are so easy to stabilize products with eggs. So, we put them for mouthfeel and stuff like that, but let's say I have flour that's too weak because it's too much starch and I need more protein in there, egg to the rescue. And we can use egg white because it's a high amount of protein. So the egg white is pretty much just protein and water. So when we add an egg white to something, we know that we're adding, yes, moisture to a product, but we're also adding protein, which will help us to stabilize. So there's some sauces that we make that would be considered a cooked custard, and that would be sauce anglaise, English sauce, vanilla sauce. Oh wait, those are all the same thing. That's right. Vanilla sauce, English sauce, and sauce anglaise are all the same name for the same sauce. And vanilla sauce is a cooked custard. It's just done in a different way. So what we do is we take eggs and we take sugar and we whisk those two things together, and we'll add a little bit of milk in there. But before we start whisking those things together, we have a pot on a burner with our liquid ingredients and probably a little bit of our sugar to prevent scorching. And then we're going to bring that up to a boil, and we're going to stream that into our eggs and sugar and a little bit of cold milk mixture. And while we stream that in stages, we're whisking the entire time. And this prevents our eggs from scrambling by being shocked into a hot liquid. So we're slowly lifting the temperature of our eggs and sugar mixture so that when we put it into the pot to cook it further, we aren't scrambling our eggs and everything is coming together nice and smooth. And the sugar in with the eggs actually helps our eggs because it allows for their cooking temperature to be higher than what the eggs cooking temperature typically is when it is just eggs alone. So it's really important that we mix that sugar in with our eggs. And then when we have our eggs and our sugar and our milk, and it's all hot and it's in the pot again. So you're streaming the hot liquid into your egg sugar mixture, and then you're taking that mixture and dumping it all the way back into the pot. You're going to whisk it together until it comes together nice and smooth. And then you're actually sticking it back on the heat. And you're taking a wooden spoon and you're stirring it the entire time. You never can walk away from the sauce while you're making it. You have to be ready to go from start to finish with the whole process, including having an ice bath in a chinois ready to strain the sucker as soon as it's done cooking on the burner. So you're going to keep stirring this once it's in the pot, okay? And we're stirring it with a wooden spoon, and we're going to test for something known as nappe consistency. Nappe consistency happens right around 180 degrees. So coagulation of eggs actually starts much sooner than that. So when we're taking if you think about scrambled eggs being at 160 degrees, 165 being that they're ready to eat, and we're actually taking it to nappe consistency, which is right around 180, we're actually pushing the cooking temperature of our eggs way further than what it typically would be when it's being scrambled. So it's really important that we have everything to stop this cooking process as soon as possible when we finish cooking. Also, it's kind of like a breeding ground of bacteria, so we need an ice bath. But when we're taking it to nappe consistency, what we're really trying to do is test to see if it's hit 180 degrees without needing a thermometer. The reason for this is if we allowed for ourselves to go get our thermometer and try and temp it to 180, it could very easily go beyond 180 degrees, which will cause the separation of our custard. So we need to know by sight and feel that we are at 180 without having to wait on a thermometer to tell us it is. So the wooden spoon that we've been using to stir this mess the whole time is also our testing indicator for nappe. So what we do is we take the wooden spoon out of the mixture. It has to be a wooden spoon, by the way. It cannot be a red-handled rubber spatula, and it cannot be a metal spoon because metal conducts heat and the rubber spatula will give us a false reading. So we're going to pull the wooden spoon out of our mixture of sauce anglaise, and we're going to swipe our finger across it, and we're going to wait for a line to be held. And if the sauce doesn't run back together, then we know that it's time to take it out of the pot, into the chinois, into the ice bath, and allow it to start cooling like that. Very, very important that you follow all those steps in their proper and appropriate timing. So, a good picture of nappe consistency is on your PowerPoint. So you see that wooden spoon that is over the pot? You see how there's a line and it's not running together? That's because they've hit nappe consistency, and that's what we're looking for. A nice clean line that's not running together and a thickness that holds its own, but it's not coagulated. Nice and smooth. Delicious vanilla sauce. Think about what you like your vanilla sauce to be like. Nice and smooth. Also, you don't want it to be chunky in any kind of a way because you can feel that easily, and it'll look ugly on a plate. But did you also know that vanilla sauce is the base for ice cream, also known as frozen custard? Again, the wink, it doesn't go away. I don't know what's happened there. But, so it's a pretty versatile sauce. We use it for a lot of different things, and we use it as a base for a lot of things, like Bavarian cream. Bavarian cream is a really delicious dessert. It starts always with the vanilla sauce as its base, and then we take some gelatin while the vanilla sauce is still hot, and we melt that gelatin into the flavored base after it has been bloomed. The gelatin has been bloomed, so we squeeze out any excess water, or we take the mass of granules that have been bloomed and we put it into our hot vanilla sauce base, and we let that kind of mesh and melt into our vanilla sauce. And then we're going to take some whipped cream, we're going to whip it up, we're going to take it to about medium peak, and we're going to fold that in to our vanilla sauce gelatin mix, and then we're going to pipe that into either ramekins that were already prepared or into cakes as a filling. So Bavarian cream is very versatile as well. Bavarian cream is not that stuff that you get out of a bucket. It is not what you find in a Krispy Kreme donut. It's very different. It's much lighter. And as long as it has a vanilla sauce base, you can take that Bavarian cream and turn it into chocolate Bavarian, strawberry Bavarian, whatever. You just need to start with the vanilla sauce base first, and then you just follow the same steps and procedures that you would for your typical Bavarian cream. So that's going to be on a test. Just so you know, we already talked about tempering and going through that whole process. Again, that is in your PowerPoints. Remember, don't go beyond 180 degrees. There are other kinds of custards that we make, like creme caramel, cup custard, flan, creme brulee, those would also be custards, and we can't take those custards beyond 180 degrees either. That's why we bake them in a water bath. If you go beyond that, you get those nice tunnels. Can you see them? It looks like cottage cheesy nasty, and that's not what we want. You want to get a better view of it? Go look at your PowerPoint. So we really want nice and smooth things with our custard. So always in a water bath, fill that water bath as high up the sides of the containers, the ramekins that you're baking in, as you possibly can without getting water into the product itself. And it will keep your water from going beyond 212 degrees, which is boiling temperature. So you're baking at like 325 with a water bath, and it will keep your custards baking low and slow without coagulation. That would cause the breakdown and separation of your eggs and liquid. And that's what causes the separation of a cooked cream and custard, is going beyond 180 degrees or going beyond nappe consistency. Okay? So then we talked about Bavarian cream already. On your PowerPoint, there's also images of different types of Bavarians. Super cool. It also goes through the same process that I kind of ran through rather quickly. Then we get into whipped cream. When we're talking about Bavarians, I should have gone into this. So whipped cream, when you're making whipped cream for your Bavarian or for anything, you want to make sure that your bowl is really good and cold. Your whip that you're using to whip air into your heavy cream is really good and cold, and that your cream itself is really good and cold. The reason all those things need to be good and cold is because if the fat in your heavy cream is melted, it's not going to hold air. Think of oil trying to hold air. It doesn't work. But butter can hold air because it's cold. And when it's cold, it can hold that air. But if it's hot, it's not going to get the same volume. So we need to make sure that everything is nice and cold, and it prevents friction factor from happening and all those things. You also need to remember that when you're making whipped cream, you have to be using heavy whipping cream or heavy cream so that it holds the air. It has a high enough fat content to hold that air. Half and half won't work, and neither will milk. Okay, so if you overmix your whipped cream or your heavy whipping cream, you'll make butter. You will. The fat will separate out from the liquid, and you'll have butter residing on top, and that liquid underneath would be your buttermilk, hence the name buttermilk. Okay, so on to the good stuff, because this is something that you're also going to be doing for a lab, and that's pastry cream. Okay, so remember when we were talking about vanilla sauce, and we put the eggs and the sugar together while our liquid ingredients, be it cream or milk, when they were coming to a boil, there's a little bit of sugar in there to prevent scorching. Remember that? That's the same process that we're doing for pastry cream. However, in with our eggs and our sugar is going to be another ingredient known as cornstarch. So the cornstarch, we're going to make a slurry out of the sugar, the cornstarch, and the egg. There's going to be a little bit of sugar in with the primary amount of milk. There might be a little bit of milk that we pull and reserve in with our eggs, but the majority of it's going to be on the burner. And it's going to have maybe a little bit of the sugar in with that milk just to prevent scorching. We're going to bring that milk up to a full-on boil, and then we're going to take our cornstarch, our eggs, and our sugar, and that little bit of milk if we reserved it, and we're going to whisk it all together. And then we'll make sure that it comes together nice and smooth. And then we're going to stream our liquid that gets nice and hot up to a boil, and we're going to stream that into our eggs, sugar, and cornstarch mixture. And then so we go through the whole tempering process the same way now as we did with our vanilla sauce. And then we take that egg mixture, we dump it into the rest of the liquid ingredients once it's come up to temperature enough, and then we start whisking. So at this point, instead of using a wooden spoon, we're using a whisk. And we're whisking like crazy, and we don't stop whisking until that mixture has thickened. Once it has thickened, we take it, we dump it into a mixing bowl, and it'll thicken and it'll sit there bubbly thickened for a few minutes because we had to cook out the starch flavor. And then we dump that into the mixing bowl. We spit it with a paddle. We let it start working. We dump in our vanilla extract and we put in our butter at the very end to finish it off. If we wanted to cool it even more, because we weren't using it straight away, we would again put this on an ice bath. We would put plastic wrap directly on the surface of the pastry cream to prevent a skin from forming. All right, so it's all nice and lovely. We can turn it into diplomat cream by taking some of that whipped cream that we were talking about earlier and mixing it in 50-50. It's a 1-to-1 ratio for diplomat cream. So you take pastry cream, say a pound of pastry cream, a pound of whipped cream, fold those two together, and you have diplomat cream. Pretty cool. So then, because we're making pastry cream and it has cornstarch, I tell you guys a little bit more about, bless me, a little bit more about cornstarch. All right, so initially cornstarch, the kind that we have, is just cornstarch. It's not modified, it's just regular old cornstarch. So that cornstarch is great, but it does break down rather quickly. It breaks down in the presence of fruit acids and enzymes, and it also breaks down in freezing temperatures. And it also doesn't last long just in general. Like you make pastry cream, you come back the next day, you're already going to see liquid purging out of the pastry cream. It's just the nature of what it is. So I always have a tendency to make the pastry cream, use the pastry cream, and not let it sit in the refrigerator for any length of time because why? It's not going to be as good a product as it should have been. And I never let my pastry cream go into the freezer because it'll break it down and it's not nice. It doesn't look good and it doesn't taste good. So you lose that mouthfeel that you're going for, and it'll ruin whatever product you put it in because it's starting to purge the liquid and it's just all sorts of bad. So I'm not the only one that had a problem with this. Apparently a lot of bakers had a problem with it. So what they did was they made what is known as a modified cornstarch. Okay, so the names of those modified cornstarch are things like waxy maize, clear gel, stuff like that, canning gel. All of that is different forms of modified cornstarch. So starch is made up of a couple of granules. Kind of like gluten is made up of a couple of granules, starch is made up of a couple of granules too. And these two granules come together and that's starch. So you have amylose and amylopectin, okay? Those are the two starch granules that make up starch. Kind of like glutenin and gliadin make up gluten, amylose and amylopectin make up starch. So amylose is not the gelatinizing agent, it's more of the starchy, sticky agent. And so it's kind of the thing that allows stuff to kind of purge out. So when they decided to modify the cornstarch, they went ahead and pulled out the sticky starch. So amylopectin is this, let me rephrase that. Amylose is the starchy, non-sticky type of starch. I think I said that opposite. So amylose is the one that's non-sticky. Amylopectin is sticky, okay? So amylose is non-sticky. So when we're going through and we're modifying it, and I kind of give you a breakdown of that, we pull out the sticky starch of amylopectin, and we leave the amylose, which doesn't gelatinize, but stays nice and smooth and clear. So amylopectin is soluble in water. Amylose isn't. So anyway, I give you kind of this breakdown of what it is. So we're pulling out one, we're letting amylose do its thing. This is what it looks like when we've gone the modified cornstarch route, okay? That first one is a filling made with flour and cornstarch. And then the second one is what we've used waxy maize with, which is the modified cornstarch, where we've removed some of the amylopectin. Okay, so anyway, the whole point of that is we like modified cornstarches because modified cornstarch allows us to freeze starch stabilized products without having to worry about it breaking down and purging out liquid. We can also make pies and fillings that can be canned and last for a long time. Think about when you go to the grocery store and you buy cherry pie filling. And that goo, that's waxy maize. That's the clear gel. That is your modified starch in there. So modified cornstarch doesn't break down to fruit acids and enzymes. It doesn't break down to freezing temperatures. It can be canned. So there's a lot of really good things there. Now, let's switch gears a little bit and talk quickly about pie dough. Okay, pie dough in America, we already talked a little bit about pâte brisée and pâte sucrée. We know what they are. When we are making a flaky pie dough, which is the American form of pie dough, we like to have the flaky dough. And that's what you're going to be making in class. What you're doing with that is you're kind of tossing in little tiny bits of fat into flour. So it's not smooth, it's not combined nicely, it's not going through the creamy method at all. All right, so when we do this, when we toss the fat into the flour, we're using really ice cold fat, we're using ice cold flour, and we're using ice cold water to make this happen. Then we put a little bit of salt in there, sometimes a tiny bit of sugar. We don't want a lot of sugar in our pie dough because that can pull moisture out of the filling and give us a soggy crust. But when we do it right and we don't overwork the dough and we don't overwork gluten strands and we do everything the right process, it comes out flaky, like that first picture, nice flaky dough. Okay, the other ones, those little tart shells in the bottom, those are pâte sucrée, and then pâte brisée would be what that quiche is made out of. Okay, so there's a couple of different pictures all across the way that you can kind of look at for that. And then I go through some helpful tidbits. When we're making pie dough, we don't want gluten development. You do not want gluten development, okay? Don't overwork your dough. It won't work out well for you. And it will take away from the flakiness that we're trying to accomplish in our pie dough. What's the difference between flaky pie dough and mealy pie dough? Mealy pie dough doesn't have the huge pockets in it. Again, though, we still don't want gluten development. So it follows the same process, except the little pieces of fat that are chunked up into the dry ingredients are much smaller than what we have in the flaky pie dough. Okay? The main flour that we use when making pie dough is going to be either all-purpose flour or pastry flour. We don't want a high gluten flour, and we don't want cake flour because it doesn't have enough gluten. We have to have a nice middle ground there. When you are making fluid pies like pecan pie or pumpkin pie, you want to go ahead and start off with a par-baked crust because you want the filling and the crust to finish at the same time. So if your crust for your, let's say, pecan pie is not cooked at all, not only will it not cook in the same timing as the filling, but it will also have a tendency to pull that high sugary filling down into the crust itself, which can allow for the pie filling to actually sit underneath the pie crust. It can turn into a very big, sticky, icky mess. So we don't want to do that. We want to go ahead and use a pre-baked, like a par-baked pie crust. So we do that by putting pie weights into the crust and baking it for part of the process and then finishing it the rest of the way with the filling inside of it. Fruit pies, when you're making any kind of a fruit pie or double crust pie, your dough is actually going to be not baked at all. Your crust is going to bake along with the pie filling in their exact same timing. Of course, here we have to make sure that we are actually cutting our apples to appropriate sizes so that they can actually bake in the appropriate timing with our pie crust. So a couple of things about pâte sucrée. It's used for sweet applications. It's made through a traditional creamy method. Pâte brisée is often made through a combination method, meaning that it's creamed, and it might have eggs folded in or what have you. Neither one is flaky or mealy. And obviously pâte brisée is made for more savory applications, where pâte sucrée is made for sweeter applications, and pâte sucrée typically has more eggs in it than pâte brisée. Notice that both pâte sucrée and pâte brisée do have eggs in them, which is something that we do not have in our flaky pie crust. Our pie crusts are going to be made up of salt, maybe a little bit of sugar, butter, flour. And again, remember, you do not want a lot of sugar in your pie crust, because sugar likes to be hygroscopic and it will pull moisture from the filling down into the crust, which will give you a low quality, soggy, nasty crust. Okay, so that's that. Those are our lectures. So get ready, because I'm going to be opening up a quiz too. Make sure that you take the embedded quizzes in all of these lectures, but there's going to be another quiz aside from those quizzes that you have to take over all of this content. All right, I'll see you guys later.